you can infuse your organization with a culture of coaching throughout. And let me see, how is that? It's not moving. What do I have to do to get my slides to move? Oh, there we go. So we start with the premise that conversations matter. The quality and tone of conversations in the organization is a major way that the culture of the organization is progenerated. This is where the values, even in informal conversations in the hallway or around the edges of meetings, the quality of those conversations really set the culture of the organization. It's where the values of the organization are infused throughout, as people tell stories of admiration, who are to be commended, and then what kind of stories do we tell about people whose behaviors or actions we don't approve of, that don't seem aligned with the values of the organization. And so what infusing a culture of coaching is really about is trying to equip people that we have much more productive and uplifting conversations that equip people to really be their best in the work that they do. Oops, backwards. So in our work, we have identified what we call 5 concerns of coaching. The kinds of things that we're trying to accomplish through these conversations, through these powerful conversations that we have. The first is to raise consciousness, to raise awareness of people about their own practice, to invite them to watch themselves and to be self-reflective through the very, very powerful questions that we ask through coaching. And through that awareness, that can help them to find their solutions to their own problems. But we do want to be a support to people, but we also want to be building capacity so that more and more they're able to solve more of the problems. What we don't want to do is set up a dependency model where they're really not well equipped to figure out how to move forward or how to confront challenges on their own. Another concern that we really want to keep in mind as coaches is the importance of connection. It is through this vibrant connections that we are able to set a tone for the kind of powerful conversations we hope to have, and to create enough of a safety net that people are willing to take risks and move forward, to try new things, because all new learning involves some, moving out into the unknown. And trying things that you haven't tried before, and it might be rocky at first. And so having a connection to a caring and supportive coach helps to set the stage for taking those risks. We're also, of course, focused on competence. We want to build the competence of the person who we're coaching. And as I've said, our intent is in building their capacity, not setting up a dependency. So if we take too much responsibility for their learning and growth, if we are very prescriptive in what we tell them to do, then we're doing a less good job, perhaps, of helping to equip them to develop the kind of problem-solving muscles that they need, that are inherent in being a professional educator. And then we really want to bolster and celebrate the contribution that they're making through their professional lives. So we want to work on helping them to recognize what are the contributions that they're making, to point to those and to highlight those so that we celebrate those. And then that fuels the motivation to stay in the game, to keep pushing forward and to broaden and deepen that contribution that they make. And then finally, we want to evoke some creativity, some creative new solutions to the work that we're doing through that. And so again, through the safety and the connection that we create through our coaching alliance, we are hoping to set a stage, and through the questions, powerful questions we ask, set the stage for them to kind of come up with new things, new ways of addressing the challenges that they face. Keep going backwards. So one of the benefits that we get from creating a culture of coaching and broadening out that systems of support, so that it's not all on our shoulders as the leaders, but that we have colleagues supporting one another, is that we bolster a sense of collective teacher efficacy. And this is a construct that really has been getting a lot of attention lately, since John Hattie identified it as the strongest effect size of all of the things that he's studied over such a long time. So suddenly it's in the news. And what I will say from my own research, it is a very powerful indicator of positive outcomes throughout the school, positive student outcomes, as well as it's related to important teacher behaviors as well. And so what collective efficacy is a collective belief that we've got what it takes to get the job done. Whatever challenges there might be in this particular environment, collectively, we have the skills, the capacity, the know-how to effectively educate the students in our care. And that ends up being very powerful because that belief is then related to motivation and persistence. So it grows out of work by Albert Bandura, sort of the father of this line of thinking of social cognitive theory. And so self-efficacy is a belief in my own and individual capacity to get the job done. Whatever is my goal or my outcome, this is a way that I can, I know that I can get from here to there. So there may be challenges along the way, it may be a process, but I have good faith that I'll be successful in the end. And when I have that faith in my own capacity, I'm more likely, I put more effort into moving forward. I will have more persistence. If I run into difficulties or obstacles along the way, I'm more likely to pick myself up, brush myself off, get back in the game, because of my belief that I'll be able to get to that endpoint, to that the goal that I want to accomplish successfully. And then I'll be more resilient when things don't go well. So when we apply that to teaching, it turns out that teachers who believe in their capacity to effectively educate their students, even those students who are unmotivated, those students who are difficult, whose behavior isn't, they're not showing up with all of the social emotional skills, self-regulation skills, that we wish they would have. But if we believe, yeah, I'm going to be able to be successful with all of these students, then it turns out that teachers are more motivated. They put more effort into their planning and to their teaching. They are more persistent. When students are struggling, they're less likely to bring negative affect and blaming or frustration to the student, and instead can find more effective interventions for working with those students. And then they're more resilient when they have those inevitable difficult days as a teacher, they bounce back more quickly, because they think this, rather than thinking this is kind of a fatal flaw, oh, I'm just not cut out to be a teacher, I don't think I'm going to be able to be successful with all these kids. Instead, if they hold the belief, I can get this done. So it's like, well, okay, so that was a bad day, or this was a temporary setback, but that's just renewed my focus of, let me find some more strategies, let me find some more resources and get in the game. And then they have greater enthusiasm, which is what this picture conveys, for the work they do. So those building self-efficacy through coaching then can lead to a culture, as that spreads, to collective teacher efficacy. So how do we build a sense of self-efficacy and build the collective efficacy of our whole faculty? Well, from Bandura, he said the most powerful way to build a belief in your own success is to be successful. So, if I've been doing this for a while and I've had successes, then I can establish a pretty firm belief that I'm going to be able to continue to be successful in the future. But what about for novice teachers who haven't had a lot of time to develop those mastery experiences? Then there's some other sources that are important as well. One is vicarious experiences, watching other people who are being successful. And at that, and particularly the more similarity we see between ourselves and those other people who are successfully engaged in the work that we want to do for teaching, for example, the more powerful is this as a source of efficacy. We say, well, if he can do it, I think I can do it, or if she can do it. And besides the fact that we pick up strategies and tips from watching people. So this can be part of developing a culture of coaching, is finding ways for teachers to visit in each other's classrooms, to be able to watch how other people are being successful with the same population of students. Another source of self-efficacy then is social persuasion or verbal persuasion, having trusted people around who say, I believe in you. I really think you're going to be able to be successful at this. And so through those messages, we can keep people in the game enough, and we can, help with developing their problem-solving strategies to help them get to those mastery experiences, which are so powerful. And then finally, there's affective states. If somebody is, got a knot in the pit of their stomach every morning as they're getting ready to teach, that's going to lower their sense of self-efficacy. And so having the support of a coach who can help people feel better, feel more optimistic going in, then that's going to affect their affective states. So coaching can help with all of these sources of self-efficacy. And one of the things that's really powerful, especially when we're working with novice teachers, is that once the self-efficacy beliefs are established, by the end of about the third year, people have a pretty good sense of either, I think I'm pretty good at this, I think I'm going to be successful, like I still have room to grow, but I'm a pretty good teacher. And then we have all those benefits of greater effort and persistence and resilience. Whereas if at the end of this novice period, this 3 to 5 years, they have a pretty shaky sense of like, I'm not sure I'm so very good at this. So some people at that point leave, and just, it's painful to show up to a job that you don't feel like you're very good at. And especially with kids, that can be pretty miserable. So some of those people leave, but some of them stay and they hang out, but they have a low sense of self-efficacy, and they contribute to a low collective efficacy in the group. And then they find various ways to cope with that low self-efficacy. So one of the strongest implications for us in schools as school leaders of the research on self-efficacy and collective efficacy is that we need to do a good job, and in many cases a much better job, of supporting novice teachers so that by the end of that third year, they have a pretty robust sense of self-efficacy, because then we get greater effort and persistence and resilience for the span of their career. If we don't protect them, if we give them the most challenging assignments, and we have a long history in education of sort of having some hazing rituals for people who are joining us, for young educators, and a sense of entitlement for people who are more veteran to have the easier to teach kids. Like, I earned it. I hung in here all this long time. And now, now it's my turn for the gravy. I want those classes, smaller classes, easier to teach kids, and let those new kids on the block, earn their keep with the more challenging assignments. But that, as a field and as leaders, we need to work to shift that thinking, because what we're doing is driving down self-efficacy, and then it gets stuck. It's not that it can't change later in the career, but Bandura says it takes a shock of something for people to reevaluate. So early on, people are questioning, I wonder how good I'm going to be at this new endeavor. After a few years, you stop, don't get out of bed every morning and say, gee, I wonder how good I'm going to be today. You start assuming I'm going to be about as good at this job as I have been up till now. And so it falls off the radar of self-reflection. So this is a really key part of coaching, is to bolster people's self-efficacy, and so that we reap all of the benefits that come from that. So, as Andy said, my husband and I collaborated to write 2 books on coaching, one with a focus on those who coach teachers, and another with a focus on those who coach leaders. And coaching, as I said before, coaching has really taken off as an effective intervention, because we have found that more traditional forms of professional development, putting a whole group of people in a big room and calling in an expert to give a lecture, much like I'm doing today, but it's not very effective in making long-term change. And so, but coaching is an expensive intervention as well. And so we want to make sure that we get the most out of it. And if we have a vision for creating a culture of coaching in our schools, then we need a model that's going to help guide people to have productive conversations and not get into this cycle of negativity that people have found can grow out if people don't have a proper mindset as they're asked to work with their colleagues. And it can really damage relationships and create conflict in the organization if we don't do it with instilling a sense of care. So our definition of coaching is that we're calling forth. Our title of evocative coaching is about calling forth, giving voice. And this is in alignment with our people-centered philosophy, that what we want to do as coaches, is to help the person find their calling, find their voice in their own professional lives. And through that, we want to call forth motivation and movement. Those are our goals. We want people to be motivated to invest effort and thought and commitment into their work. And then we want to see movement. We want to see people trying new things, getting engaged with how they can build on their own successes and continue to move forward to develop. And the ways we do that are through conversation and a way of being. So those are our tools as coaches. And although those seem like those are kind of ordinary things, marshaled in the right way, they can be very, very powerful. And then we have outcomes that we're trying to accomplish. And along the way, when you get better at what you do professionally, your life feels a lot better. So that how we show up, that coaching presence, is the first thing that we pay attention to. That because if we dash into a coaching session, fresh off of some other conflict or other things we're doing, if we are distracted, if we've got so many things on our mind that we're not giving our full attention to the person that we are coaching, we're not going to be as effective in coaching. So learning to pause, to take a moment to sort of set ourselves, to get settled into our intention for the coaching conversation, and then the kind of energy that we hope to bring. So we want to bring a sense of calm assurance. There's a saying in the coaching realm that my assurance is stronger than your doubt. So even if we're working with somebody who is, their self-efficacy is a little shaky at this point, that we can carry their fears and anxiety with a sense that I know you can do this. I know there is a way. Success is here to be found. We're going to find our way through. We also want to bring an openness to possibility, that, you know, there's lots of solutions to this problem, not one right answer. And we can have some fun exploring those. And so then the third is we want to bring a sense of playfulness. And that, although the work we do is very, very serious, and our student outcomes are in play, are in the balance here. And so especially if we're working with somebody who's struggling, there's a detriment to our students, and our duty of care is to our students. But just because the work is very serious itself, having a tone of seriousness, we may lose some of the creativity that's possible if we can create a little more sense of lightheartedness or playfulness. So there's a connection between playfulness and creativity, which tech firms have figured out, and that I would like to see us infuse more back into the realm of education. So our coaching model centers around 4 what we call dance steps. So we offer them, we teach them in order, and like when you write a book, you have to have chapters in order. But we really see these as a set of steps, a set of tools for coaches to have in their toolkit to marshal depending on the needs of the moment. So that you may, in any particular coaching conversation, emphasize one more than the other, but recognizing that in the end, what we're trying to accomplish is motivation and movement. So the first thing we do is listen for stories. That stories are very powerful ways that people convey how they're making meaning of their world. And then we want to express empathy for that. So not just listen, but really engage in ways that they know we're with them, that we get it. And then we want to appreciate their strengths. What are they already doing? Even if the situation looks bleak, even if they're feeling overwhelmed and distressed, we will get farther faster. That's our belief. We'll go farther faster if we build on their strengths. And this connects back with self-efficacy. If we can build on strengths, we can say, okay, we're not starting for nothing here. We have some things that are working. How do we build on those and move forward? And then we design a way forward. So I just want to talk a little bit more about each of those. So as I said, stories are important because they give us a window into what's in somebody's mind, how are they making sense of their world, but also where are their values, what stirs their heart. And so taking time to listen to each other's stories, to invite the telling of those stories, and then spending time with those is very, very powerful in establishing that sense of connection back to those 5 C's, getting at that, but also about their sense of connection. We may see glimmers of where they have used creativity in the past. We might start getting some ideas about how to build on some of the strengths that we hear through those stories for moving forward. So taking the time to listen well. And when we do training in around coaching, we spend some time really trying to hone our listening skills, because I think most of us think we're a pretty good listener. But then we find out, that we often listen with just one ear. We've got, we're already thinking about our response. Actually, I did do an exercise that I just did with my students last week, where we just play a little game called Listen for the Last Word. And so it's a pair who are talking. One person starts talking, and then the other person has to listen, and they can't, when they respond, their first word has to be the last word that the other person said. And so what you find when you're doing this exercise is how much of the time we're spending constructing our responses as we're listening. And when you are not able to do that because you don't know when they're going to stop and what their last word's going to be, it's a very different way of being with somebody. And so it raises to consciousness how much we're in our own heads, even when we appear to be listening, and even when we've invited somebody to share their story. So honing our listening skills is one of a key coaching competency. And I love this quote from Salman Rushdie. I'm not reading most of my slides, but this is a beautiful thought. He said, those who do not have power over the story that dominates their lives, the power to retell it, rethink it, deconstruct it, joke about it, and change it as times change, truly are powerless because they cannot think new thoughts. So this just reinforces the idea that taking the time to listen to somebody's story and then inviting some playfulness around that, rethinking it, can really be helpful in shifting people's thinking, which is what is behind new behavior. We're not going to have new behavior until we have new thoughts. So, and then we want to respond by expressing empathy, by letting them know that we get it, we have heard them, and to offer a caring response. So we have a process. Again, I think many of us think we're good at empathy, but I have found it in my own life and for hundreds of people I've worked with that it is helpful to have a model about how to express empathy so that we don't get into sympathy, which is emotional contagion. All right, you're furious at somebody, and now I'm going to be furious on your behalf. And if we both are furious, then the creativity for both of us has been diminished. So, or you're sad or depressed. If I join you in that, then I've sort of lost the advantage that I can bring as a coach to have to be one step removed. So honoring and respecting the sometimes strong feelings that you are expressing, but holding a space, that calm assurance. So I'm not going to get caught up in those emotions. And then we stay away from pity. Pity is feeling sorry for somebody. And there are times when people have really hard things happening in their lives. And so being with them in pity there's a place for that. But as coaches, we want to help to empower and equip them to move through whatever they're facing. So we don't want to reinforce a sense that, oh, you poor thing, that they don't have the capacity for moving forward. Part of that, our belief in them and our verbal persuasion is we can get through this. We'll find a way to get through. And then once we have offered empathy for the story, if it's been a particularly juicy story, then we may choose to play with the story a little bit in ways that we call imaginative story listening. We may go back and invite the person to retell the story from the vantage point of someone else in that situation. So if it's a teacher telling a story about a student, like, well, could you tell the story as if you were the student? What's it look like and sound like from that person's, or a conflict between colleagues? And it's amazing to me how deeply people can get, with a little bit of coaxing, a little encouragement, how deeply people can get into that other voice and then speak passionately from the other person's point of view and then come out of it and go, wow, no wonder he acted that way. No wonder she said that. So that it can really develop some perspective taking and some empathy on the part of the person we're coaching. A pivot point might be an invitation to just pick any point in that story when you might have made a different decision. And we want them to pick that point, because if we pick it, it's like, well, here's where you went wrong. And that's not the energy around this. But to just recognize our days are filled with decisions, hundreds of decisions each day. And if we just change a few of those decisions, it could lead to a different outcome. So this is kind of a choose your own ending of their own stories of their lives. And then the lesson points is just like, if you have if there were a moral to this story, if your story you just told me it was a fable, what would be the moral of that story? What are we taking away? What have we learned from that? Going backwards. And we are looking for, through the stories and through the empathy, we're looking for this beautiful, beautiful moment we call the golden sigh, where we may hear an actual exhalation of breath. We may see the shoulders drop. We may see the head bob. It's a moment where it's clear that they have felt heard. And then we have this connection that is this point of readiness for then moving into the rolling up our sleeves and getting ready to move forward into new action. So the golden sigh is not the goal in and of itself, but if we can create the conditions where we do have this sense of relief, this sort of engagement and a real sense of connection, then we're going to be more productive with moving forward. And then what we want to do is focus on their strengths, to say, okay, what I've seen, what I've heard, or we can invite them to share with us where have been their successes professionally, because that gives us a grounding, a basis of little, maybe just a scrap of self-efficacy, but we got a little bit of self-efficacy here, and our work as coaches is to grow that. We do that through a process called appreciative inquiry. And the underlying principles of appreciative inquiry suggest that when we engage in a change initiative, whether it's an individual change initiative through coaching, or it's through a whole school initiative for change, what we're hoping for is positive actions and outcomes, right? Did anybody ever start a change process that, no, what I want is more negativity. I want negative outcomes. We want positive outcomes. Of course we do. So how do we do that? Where does that come from? How do we get those positive actions and outcomes? Well, this philosophy says if we cook up positive energy and emotion, we're going to get more likely to get the positive actions and outcomes. So, nobody's against positive energy and emotion, but where do we get it? Where does it come from? Well, this says if we have positive conversations and interactions, that generates positive energy and emotion that lead to positive actions and outcomes. So where do we have that? Those conversations are, as I said, really the heart of the culture of an organization. If it's not as positive as we wish it was, how do we get that? How do we move to where the conversations and interactions between the people in our environment are more positive? Well, this is the simultaneity principle says the instant we change our questions, we can change the dynamics of the conversations and interactions. When we shift from asking what's wrong, and then the implicit follow on, which is, and who's to blame? If we shift from saying what's right here, what's going well, what do we have to build on? What do we have to celebrate? That's going to shift the dynamics of the conversations and interactions so that we cook up more positive energy and emotions and get more positive actions. So how do we get that to that place where we change our questions, where we shift? A positive anticipation of the future. When we generate hope. If we think our best days are behind us, our conversations are going to be about gloom and doom and, oh, woe is me. But if we have a sense of hopefulness, like we have these, this is a tough time living through this pandemic, living through the moment we're having around social justice. These are some very, very real challenges that are really discouraging. But if we have the sense we have the capacity to get through this, we're going to come out stronger on the other side, then we have hope. Then we can ask positive questions. Then we can have positive conversations, generate positive energy, and have positive outcomes. And so how do we get hope, when things are so discouraging and often and that things are difficult? Well, we pay attention to positive attention in the present. It's called the poetic principle. And this is what poets do, is they draw our attention to simple, everyday, ordinary things in a way that imbues them with a sense of meaning and purpose. And so we can be invited to examine our simple, ordinary, everyday workings in our schools in a way that imbues it with a sense of meaning and purpose. Then that will generate hope, generate positive, shift to more positive questions. We'll get more positive conversations, more positive energy, and come out with more positive actions and outcomes. So I'd like to pause now. How are we doing on time? I think we have a few more minutes. So I would like to have you just take a short opportunity, if we're going to break into pairs, and to talk with whoever you end up with about a time when you there was, pardon me, somebody in your life who really championed you. And how did that person support you? How did you feel when you were with that person? What opportunities did you pursue as a result of your champion's encouragement? And what beliefs about yourself may have shifted or deepened as a result of something your champion said or did? And then you may not have time, but if you have time, you can think about some wishes that you might have for around the quality of dialogue in your own school. What would they be? So, but let's focus just on the first question because our time is short. Let's take 5 minutes and have those conversations. So I think Sherry's going to help us to get into diet. Fingers crossed. We can do that. Okay.
Sure, you might find that some people aren't live, so they might come back to the main screen.
I can see people who aren't assigned, and I'm assigning them.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Some people have this habit of being on the call, then not responding. It's a new webinar ploy.
So Andy, we had a capacity issue of 100 people. Do you not have the full Zoom package?
I don't know, I thought I did.
Yeah, I thought you did too. But we could only have 100 people. And so there were a bunch of people that emailed me.
That's why people were coming in and out. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, so I was trying to tell people when something opened up.
Hi, Ollie, how are you?
Good. I was alone in my breakout room, so I had no one to talk to.
Oh, no. Okay, we'll get you to try and reassign you. Okay, I think we've got some people who are quite on the, they're pretending they're here, but they're not really here.
Uh-huh.
see, I got invited to a breakout room. Did you all not get invited to a breakout room? Or did
I
Glenn
got,
just?
I got invited and was in a room of one, so I thought myself
Maybe.
all day long.
Yeah, so yeah, the same happened to me. So it may be just that people were not quite getting there. Our partners didn't quite make it. But anybody have oh, Andy, you're muted. Did you want to say something?
I was happy to share a story about
Someone
in
unmute you?
relation to what we were talking about. Maybe we could do it as a group so it saves some time. I had an old infant mistress when I was a young teacher who was very much one of these people who I felt was critical and critical and critical. But what I'd realized is she was actually somebody who was looking out for me. She was just a sort of a heart soul. But what I'd realized behind the scenes, she was championing and giving me opportunities and trying to help me learn and giving me sort of selective opportunities to do that. And it was unusual because she worked in a world generally of early childhood teachers, and I was this teacher that she hadn't come across before. And it took me a while to realize that she was a champion for me, and she really encouraged me and worked me through in terms of a whole set of new experiences. And I remember so dearly that I felt this woman was a really tough old bag. But when I started to realize what she was doing, I sort of could see how it was. She just never explained that to me. She just did it. So, but I've never forgotten that sort of tough love and how she was always trying to create opportunities for me. It just seemed that I was probably letting her down all the time. So it was a really interesting experience.
Yes, but it has stayed with you. That support, that tough love care has stayed
Yeah,
with
no,
you.
absolutely. And it really was. Has someone else got a story like that?
Yeah, I'll share. Similar, actually, or a little bit. My first teaching job in the UK, I had a head of department who he just didn't want me to fail, and he was so passionate, so experienced. And we would stay sometimes till 6, 7 o'clock at night with him, making sure all my lesson plans are organized and everything was as it should be. And I actually don't think I would have been the teacher that I became if it wasn't for all the time and dedication that he gave me, because he genuinely wanted me to be a successful teacher, and it has stayed with me forever.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's what we hope to develop, those kinds of relationships through this culture of coaching.
Oh, we got time for one more.
And Sherry, if you would go ahead and give us it takes 1 minute to disband. So if you would go ahead and move us, but we still have time for another quick story here in this room. Anybody think about a champion in your own world, your own life?
I can give you one real quick.
Yeah.
Tell us.
My first teaching job way back when, his name's Steve Sheaver. He's retired now, but he was just a guy. He didn't, the high school principal knew me from when I was a kid, growing up in high school and playing baseball. And so actually I was just trying to find a job, and it was the high school principal that found me, but it was the superintendent that hired me. And it was that kind of a relationship, because there was tough love in there. Oddly enough, he had an oldest son who we were the same age, kind of had traveled up through the high school. And so it was kind of that ability to follow along. He allowed me into rooms, as a young, inexperienced teacher, educator, trying to find my way. And so it was, initially those sidebar conversations where it's like, don't talk right now, just listen, come in and listen. And so, it's just a wonderful opportunity, but He's my guy, Steve Sheaver.
That's great. That's great. It feels good to remember these people in our lives that, they may not cross our minds often, but when we call them to mind, it, brings back the feeling we had when we were with them, and our gratitude for the ways that we've gone on and benefited from the support and the care that they gave us, and how that's influenced us over time.
Yeah, I think also it helps us understand that we all in some ways aspire to be those people to others. And,
Yeah.
and I think of all the people who've had the careers and the influence they've had. And often in the international world, Megan, what we find is we have to be sometimes sort of family to people, because there isn't those connections that often are overseas. So you are drawn into that. But I think we all remember those people who give so much. And I think secretly inside, we all aspire to be those people and try to do so. And you reminded us today of many of the things that we've got to do to make that happen.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Let's see if I go back at the beginning. All right. Let's zip down through. So just to finish up, I wanted to just share a last strategy for what it might look like for us to, as peer coaches, to instill a culture of coaching in our schools, for us to, as leaders, to coach a cadre of leaders below us, but that have that spread out throughout the whole organization, through instructional coaches and through peer coaches. So again, building on strengths, we might have conversations about what we call from the SOAR analysis, exploring what are their strengths, what do they believe their strengths are, what do we see as strengths, what are opportunities that they may have, where are their aspirations, and what resources do they have? Because looking at resources we can figure out how that can be more possible to take advantage of those opportunities and move towards those aspirations. And then we engage with design thinking. Design thinking suggests that first we have inspiration. So that conversation about what are our aspirations may evoke some inspiration. And then ideation, we do some brainstorming. And then we get to implementation, that we actually make some things happen. And so the way we do that is through, in the evocative coaching model, is designing smarter experiments. So we already know about SMART goals. Here we shift this because when we set goals, we can fail at those. And so it can interject a sense of fear into those. And it's also, the SMART goals have been around long enough that a lot of people have learned how to game the system. It's like, you know how you'd be successful at a SMART goal? Set a small goal, and then at the end of the year, when you have your evaluation, you're like, check, yep, I did that. So instead, we want to frame this as an experiment, as a set of experiments. So we try to take the notion of a scientist, that we're going to frame some hypotheses and then test them out and keep going. And so what makes it smarter experiment is that it is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, all of that. But the ER stands for it's evaluated and refined. So that the idea that this is an action learning cycle, not a one and done, okay, I did it, I accomplished my goal, and then now I'm done learning. This is the idea that we're just going to stay at it and keep refining our experiments to improve our professional practice. So we invite, as coaches, we invite people to frame what their way of moving forward as an if-then hypothesis. If I shift this, then I think this will happen. And then we think about our aspirations. How does this fit into our larger aspirations? We brainstorm some strategies and activities and lay out a timeline for doing it. And then what kind of data do we think is how will we know if we got better, or what's going to be our evidence at the end? And then we do this thing that's called a confidence ruler, where we ask them, all right, now we've sort of laid all this out. How likely is it that you think you're actually going to do what we've laid out here? And we're looking for a number that is 7 or higher. We want to have about a 70% chance that they really think they're going to be able to do this. If they say a lower number, then the first thing we're going to ask, if they say, well, it's a 5, this is like, it's 50-50 chance I might do this. Then the first thing we're going to ask is, why didn't you pick a 3? Or why didn't you pick a 4? Because in explaining that, they'll say, well, because I know I can do this much of it, or I can, I feel confident about this part. It's just the other part seems overwhelming. So that gets them to do some competency or capability talking. And then we say, what would it take to get it to be a 7? And then we can talk about either lowering their level of challenge or increasing the support so that we can bring it into the realm where they actually do it. Because the only way to fail the experiment is if you don't do it, then you're not going to learn anything. So we want to create conditions that they try. And sometimes if they're not really ready to move into action, we can design an awareness experiment, which is, what are you going to read? Who are you going to observe? What might you watch? Where are the resources where you could learn more about this as you move towards your aspiration? And so there's a Brazilian proverb that says, when we dream alone, it's just a dream. But when we dream together, it's the beginning of a new reality. And that's what we hope to accomplish through our coaching conversations, is by dreaming together, we have the beginning of a new reality. So that's it. Thank you so much. I don't know if we have a minute or two for questions, but I'm really delighted to have been here with you today.
Thank you, Megan. We actually are probably, to honour our commitment to AOE, we probably have got to hold off that. But
Okay.
in working with you, I know that if you got questions or people asked you questions, I know this is a good soul people. So Megan will get back to you, or we'll follow and we'll make sure that happens. Okay. My apologies for those who got lost on the call as well. We had a few technical problems. So apologies for that. But I'm just going to hand it over to the president of AISH, Chrissy Sorensen, just to say a few quick words. Thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Megan. I know when I read your book, Trust Matters, I wasn't so much surprised by anything I read as reminded of those things, large and small, that I need to explicitly and consciously do and not just leave to chance. And so I've had the same reaction to your session just now. So those things that, there are so many things that we need to explicitly and consciously do. And not just to leave to him. So a big thank you. And a big shout out to our summer seminar in July, because those of you who wanted to ask something specifically of Megan, you could do that at our summer seminar in Vancouver in July. But Andy will say a little bit more about that in a little bit. I also want to say thank you to everybody who did participate, all the participants, and for your AISH members, if you could remain on the Zoom, because we do have our AGM and we are going to start with that right away. So then I'll go into official mode. So hello, everyone. For those of you